When she said, "If you don't like living with us, feel free to leave," while they occupied my guest room and den rent-free, I didn't raise my voice. I raised boxes and started packing, not my sweaters but their shoes, their chargers, their framed vows they'd stopped honoring. You're watching Revenge Files. Subscribe for a new twist daily. 10 minutes later, a squad car idled at my curb and an officer asked me if I knew today's date. And I understood that to keep my home, I'd have to treat family like tenants and truth like the only key that fit. I live in Indianapolis, on a quiet block where the mail still comes by noon. My name is Elaine. I am a 63-year-old widow, a retired public school bookkeeper who still knows how to balance a ledger down to the penny. My son Tyler is 33. His wife Kelsey is 32. In March, after Tyler's contract work dried up, they moved into my house for a month, their words, until the new job started. A month stretched into April, then May. They were good at promises, they were bad at receipts. I covered the mortgage, the utilities, and most of the groceries. I told myself it was temporary. I reminded myself I was helping my child. But then, on April 29th, I found the third Amazon delivery that week addressed to Unit B. I don't have a Unit B. I have a 1950s ranch with 2 bedrooms and a basement laundry. I asked what Unit B was. Kelsey laughed and said, "Aspirations." The next day, the gas bill arrived at $189.16. The month before, it had been $128. I taped the bill to the fridge anyway. Next to a note I wrote in clean block letters, "We need to talk about sharing costs." Except, on May 2nd, when I set 2 envelopes on the dining table, one with the gas bill, one with the electric, Kelsey slid them back with a manicured finger. "We can't take on bills right now while we stabilize," she said. "Your house is already paid off." It wasn't. The mortgage had 14 months left. My hands shook, but I kept my voice steady. "I am not asking for rent," I said. "I am asking for fairness." She rolled her eyes. "If you don't like living with us, feel free to leave." I looked at the table I'd bought secondhand the year Tyler left for college. I thought about my husband, who died of a quiet heart attack the winter before the pandemic. He would have said, "Stay calm, count the steps, put things in order." So I did. I fetched banker's boxes from the garage. I printed labels: closet, bath, tech, misc. I started with their den, where my quilting machine used to sit. I packed her ring light. I wrapped their mugs. I cleared a shelf for their things to go out the door together when the time came. Kelsey walked in and stared at the boxes. "What do you think you're doing?" she asked. "Preparing," I said. "For you to take your belongings to your next address?" She turned on her heel, phone already in her hand. I heard her say, "My mother-in-law is having a mental breakdown. She's destroying our things." 10 minutes later, the doorbell chimed. 2 officers stood on my porch, one older, one new. Their body cameras glowed red. I stepped outside and pulled the storm door shut behind me. "Ma'am," the older one said, reading from a place of practiced calm, "we received a welfare call. Are you disoriented today? Do you know the date?" I did. It was May 3rd, 2025, a Saturday. "Yes," I said. "Saturday, May 3. You're at 4083 Brookview." "I'm the owner. My daughter-in-law made a false statement because I started packing their belongings for them to move." The younger officer asked if anyone had threatened me. "Only with freeloading," I said, and realized humor is not evidence. I changed tack. I handed them 3 papers. First, my driver's license, addresses matching. Second, a copy of my deed, which I keep in a clear sleeve inside a red binder labeled House, Legal. Third, a printed letter I'd typed in January, the same one I give to any overnight guest, in which I state that all occupants are guests of the owner while visiting, and that no tenancy is created without a written lease and rent paid. I watched their faces as they scanned. The older one nodded. Kelsey came out with crocodile tears and said, "She's losing it. She thinks I'm stealing her spoons." I could see my spoons in the dishwasher behind her. The older officer looked at me. "Would you like us to connect you to a crisis team just to be safe?" he asked. "No, thank you," I said. "I am capable, and I will be serving a written notice tomorrow." He gave me an incident number on a card. I asked, "Are your body cameras recording?" He said yes. I said, "Good. Please note that I do not consent to an involuntary evaluation. I am calm, coherent, and not a danger to myself or others. He wrote something in his book, then tipped his head and left. When the door shut, the house was too quiet. I wanted to cry. Instead, I went to my desk and made a list. Step 1, document. Step 2, notice. Step 3, court if needed. Short, plain words settle a racing mind. I opened my laptop and created a folder called May, Move Out. I saved the incident card number in a file named Police. I took pictures of the banker's boxes and the cleared shelves. I put timestamps on everything. On May 4th, I printed 2 notices, a 30-day notice to terminate occupancy effective June 5, and a separate notice of house rules with one new line at the top. Harassment, threats, or false reporting will result in termination of guest status. I mailed both to them at my address with certified mail return receipts and handed them copies at the table. Tyler looked tired and embarrassed. He held the paper while avoiding my eyes. "Mom," he said, "we just need a little more runway." I pressed my palm to the table to keep my hand from shaking. "A runway has lights," I said. "This one has a date." I changed the Wi-Fi password that afternoon. I left a handwritten note with a new one for Tyler because he was still applying for jobs. I did not give the password to Kelsey. There is kindness and there is enabling. I moved my jewelry box from my dresser to the hall safe. I took the spare keys from the ceramic dish and locked them in my car. I placed my red house, legal binder, my passport, and my checkbooks into a tote bag and set it at my bedside. It looked like I was preparing for a storm. Maybe I was. Until on May 7th, I noticed a stranger standing near my mailbox taking a photo of my porch. I stepped outside and asked if I could help. He said he was responding to a listing for a furnished room near downtown, Unit B, move-in ready, first month free. He showed me the listing on his phone. The photos were of my living room, my couch, my quilt folded over the arm. A caption read, "No owner on site." My heart dropped, then steadied. I asked for a screenshot. He obliged. I thanked him. He left. I went inside and found Kelsey on the couch. "Take down your listing," I said. "You can't sublet space you don't lease." She smirked. "It's called Hustle." I called it Exhibit D. I emailed Facebook Marketplace and flagged the listing as fraudulent, then printed the screenshot and placed it behind a tab in my binder labeled Evidence, Listings. That night, another idea arrived with the calm weight of something simple and true. I didn't need to out-argue anyone. I needed to out-record them. For the next week, I treated my home like a quiet archive. I saved every text and email. I bought a small spiral notebook and wrote down dates, times, and what was said, word for word. When Kelsey slammed a door and shouted, "You can't kick us out, it's illegal," I wrote that. When Tyler asked me softly in the kitchen, "Can we just stay until July?" I wrote that too and noted I said, "June 5 is the date." I ordered a doorbell camera. I posted a small sign next to it that said, "Video recording in use." I opened a new section in my file called APS, because I knew what came next. On May 10th, a woman from Adult Protective Services knocked, polite but firm. "We received a report of self-neglect," she said. Of course. I invited her in. I offered tea. I showed her my pantry, my medication list printed and taped inside the cabinet, my calendar with my Pilates classes on Mondays and my church volunteer shift on Thursdays. I handed her the police incident card number and my red binder. She made notes. She inspected my bathroom for grab bars and smiled when she saw them. "Do you feel safe?" she asked. "I feel prepared," I said. She closed her notebook. "I see no concerns for self-neglect," she said. "If anything changes, call me." She left her card. I placed it in a sleeve behind a tab labeled Agencies. The night before Mother's Day, Tyler and Kelsey came home late. She banged pots in the kitchen as if it were percussion class. "You are impossible," she said, loud enough for the camera to catch. "You're impossible," I echoed in my head, and went to bed. On Sunday morning, I made coffee for Tyler and me. I didn't make any for Kelsey. She announced she was going out to brunch with friends, then took the car I still insure. I wrote that down too. But then, on May 15th at 7:12 a.m., my doorbell camera caught a man I didn't know trying the handle. He cupped his face to the glass. He checked the lock on the side gate. I spoke through the intercom. "Can I help you?" He said, "I'm here for the room. Is it still free this month?" I told him no, then called the non-emergency line and added the incident to my file. I texted Tyler a screenshot. He called Kelsey. She laughed it off. "People are thirsty," she wrote back. Also, If we get a renter, we can pay you something. She used the crying, laughing emoji. I stared at my phone and decided I was done bargaining at the edge of my own bed. On May 16th, I filled out a petition for a protective order with the Marion County Clerk, citing harassment and false reporting. I attached the police incident number, the APS card, and screenshots of the listing and the doorbell footage. I kept my language plain. I am the owner. I am being harassed in my home. I have served notice. I need peace until move out. The clerk stamped my papers and gave me a court date for May 23rd. I took the elevator down, sat in my car, and cried for 3 minutes. Then I wiped my face, opened my calendar, and made a packing schedule for their things, 1 room per day, so when the date came, boxes would be ready. Court days have a smell, toner, and old carpet. On May 23rd, I wore a navy dress and low heels. I carried my red binder in a canvas bag that said, "Nevertheless," she persisted, a gift from a teacher friend. Tyler and Kelsey sat together on the left. I sat alone on the right. When the judge called our case, I stood, hands steady on the edge of the table. I spoke first. I described the call to police, the listing, the man at my door. I handed over printed photos with dates and short captions. I avoided adjectives. I let the facts do the lifting. Kelsey told the judge I was spiraling, that I was obsessing over paperwork, and that she had called police out of concern. She said they were family, not tenants, and that I had threatened to throw our clothes on the lawn. I didn't interrupt. When it was my turn again, I said, "I have not thrown anything on the lawn. I have packed their belongings to make their move easier. I served a 30-day notice. Here are the certified mail receipts." I slid the green cards across the table. The judge looked at them for a long moment. Then the judge did something small that changed the room. She leaned forward and asked, "Miss Thompson, do you feel unsafe in your home because of Miss Carter's behavior?" I looked at Kelsey's red nails and the way they drummed the table. I said, "I feel undermined, and I feel harassed. I need peace to last until June 5. The judge signed a 1-year, no harassment order against Kelsey, with a stay-away provision limited to my address, allowing Tyler to coordinate pickup of their property during specific hours. The bailiff explained it plainly. You can't be at this residence unless you're accompanied by law enforcement for a brief civil standby to pick up belongings. No overnights. Tyler's face fell. Kelsey's jaw clenched. That afternoon, I texted Tyler a schedule for pickups, Tuesdays and Thursdays between 5 and 7 p.m. I offered to have an officer present if needed. He wrote back, "Thanks, Mom." She did not write at all. On May 28th, he came with 2 friends and loaded 3 boxes labeled tech, 2 labeled bath, and 4 labeled closet into the back of a pickup. He hugged me fast, like a boy who wanted to do more than he could say. "This isn't forever," he whispered. "I know," I said. "But this part is over. Except..." On May 30th, a notice arrived taped to my front door from the city's Code Enforcement Division. It alleged that I was operating an unlicensed rooming house. There was a complaint attached, anonymous, with a photo of my porch pulled straight from the fraudulent listing. Another game, another paper. I took a breath, then took action. I called the number on the notice, invited the inspector to come the next morning, and laid my documents out again on the dining table like a familiar altar. Deed, notices, protective order, screenshots. The inspector arrived, walked through, saw 2 bedrooms, 1 occupied by me, the other empty except for 4 neatly stacked boxes. He shook his head and said, "This complaint will be closed." He left me a stamped form that said no violation. I slid it behind a tab labeled Code. June 5 came bright and not at all dramatic. I brewed coffee. I swept the porch. At 9 a.m., Tyler texted, "We're out." At 9:04, I unlocked the den and stood in the doorway. The room smelled like dust and citrus cleanser. A lone sock was under the couch. I picked it up and dropped it into a trash bag. The house breathed. So did I. With them gone, the next step was money. I made a list of the utilities I'd covered since March. I tallied the gas, electric, and water. I included the $218 I had spent repairing a dented drywall corner after one of their moving adventures. The total came to $2,146.37. Numbers do not hate you, they just tell you what happened. On June 8th, I filed a small claims action for that amount, attaching copies of the bills and my certified mail receipts. I did not ask for pain and suffering. I asked for what I could prove. Kelsey must have felt the heat from a different angle. On June 10th, a letter arrived from the city prosecutor's office saying a complaint for false reporting had been reviewed, and given the evidence, she was eligible for a diversion program, a class, a written apology, and $350 in costs. If she completed it, the case would be dismissed. If she didn't, it would be filed. I didn't need her punished. I needed her educated. I signed the form saying I agreed to diversion. Our small claims hearing was June 27th. Tyler came. Kelsey did not. I wore the same navy dress. I brought my red binder, heavier now with tabs. When the judge asked me to summarize, I kept it clean. They lived in my home from March 2 to June 5, I said. No rent was charged. I paid utilities. I served notice. I asked for help from the court to keep the peace. I am seeking reimbursement for utilities and minor damage. Tyler said, I didn't have the money, Your Honor. His voice cracked. The judge looked at him with eyes that were not unkind and said, That may be, but your mother is not a public utility. The judgment was for me, $2,146.37, plus $89 in court costs, payable within 60 days. There was no gavel bang, just a stamp and a copy handed across a counter. The clerk explained how I could record it as a judgment lien if it wasn't paid. I hoped it wouldn't come to that. I texted Tyler later, We'll figure out a payment plan. He wrote back, I'll do right by you, Mom. Sometimes the smallest sentence fixes a crack you thought would widen forever. My revenge was not fireworks. It was not a screaming match on a lawn. It was cleaner than that. It was serving papers instead of ultimatums, printing screenshots instead of rumors, setting dates instead of threats. It was walking into rooms with facts. It was choosing to be a ledger, not a warning siren. But then, in mid-July, a certified letter came to my door for Kelsey. Old habits kicked in. I signed for it and set it aside, then remembered and marched it back to the mailbox with a bold not a T this address, moved across the front. That night, the doorbell camera caught a familiar face. Kelsey stood at the edge of the porch, looking at the windows like they owed her. She didn't knock. She didn't call. She just stared. The sight stirred something like pity and something like armor. I stood in my hallway, within the no-contact order's safety, and let the camera record. She left after a minute. Tyler texted later, She's having a hard week, I replied with the crisis hotline number and nothing more. By August, the house had a new quiet. I took my niece's daughter school shopping and didn't have to ask permission to use my own car. I put my quilting machine back in the den and stitched until midnight, while a true crime podcast kept me company. I called the locksmith and had the deadbolts replaced. I left a no trespassing, owner-occupied letter at the precinct, so if another welfare call came, it would be flagged as possible harassment. I salted my driveway for the first time in years that winter, and liked the sting of the cold on my face, until, on September 3rd, a payment of $600 hit my account with a memo line that said utilities, 1/4. Tyler kept paying every other Friday. It wasn't just money. It was a line back to something decent. I didn't invite them back. I didn't have to. The boundary was the relationship now, not the punishment. Sometimes revenge looks like a door that only opens from one side. On the first Sunday of October, I boxed up the last of their forgotten things, 3 mismatched mugs, a cable, a striped scarf, and drove them to Tyler's new apartment on the east side. He hugged me and said, I'm sorry. I said, I know. He asked, do you want to see the place? I looked past him into the narrow hall and saw a rug and a plant and a light bulb with the wrong wattage. Not today, I said. But send me pictures. He laughed and said he would. I got back in my car and drove home with the windows cracked, the fall air sharp and clean. I keep the red binder on a lower shelf now. It's not a trophy. It's a tool that did its job. It holds a protective order that expires next May, a closed code complaint, certified mail cards, a small claims judgment with 3 payments marked across it in neat pen. It holds proof that I didn't scream, I didn't break. I counted the steps and kept my foot on each one. That, in the end, was the sharpest edge. Sometimes I still hear Kelsey's words, the invitation dressed as an insult, if you don't like living with us, feel free to leave. I think about the boxes lined up along the wall, about how my hands didn't shake when I wrote those labels, about how the first thing I packed was not mine, and how that changed everything. And if there's a lesson hiding in the quiet of my living room, it's this: I didn't leave. I made them go. I started packing, and this time, it was exactly what needed to be moved.